Games are the best! Is there anything they can't do? They make me laugh and cry. They send me on journeys to distant and exciting lands where I'm always the hero. They capture my imagination and dare me to dream. Without a doubt, they are the best form of art, and nothing can top them. Bullshit. The prevailing notion of games amongst enthusiasts and even some critical peers reeks to high hell, and I might as well talk about why that is. Let's start with the basic assumption. In his Manifesto for a Ludic Century, Eric Zimmerman makes a variety of claims about why games have a new relevance with the advent of digital technology. Among these is because we live in a world of systems, the new Ludic Century will be an era of games because culture is increasingly systemic and participatory. By this account, Zimmerman is falling into a particular trap that often accompanies talk that elevates games beyond their ken. That games have specific qualities that make them either uniquely or better equipped to approach a century where technology is exponentially growing in sophistication. There's a highly ludocentric focus on video game structures as the way that makes them more effective as a literacy than movies or previous mediums. I'll offer a side note to say that Zimmerman is correct to say that games are a literacy, and that gaming literacy can address problems, but he comes close to deifying what he calls the kinds of thinking that gaming literacy engenders, because this is the shameful secret of video games. They are not unique or special. They are not higher or more relevant than other forms of creative expression. Often, when people talk about the reasons for the significance of games, they offer one word. Games are great because they're interactive. No other art form demands my constant attention or engagement the same way games do. More bullshit. All art is participatory. Examining a painting, watching a stage play, listening to music, or playing games all demands two things: emotional reciprocation and frenetic engagement. They require you to feel and think. That's it. No one medium demands you do more than the other. You might toss the argument out that games are innately more physical, that throwing a baseball is more active an experience than sitting in a chair and watching a movie. But this distinction belies a misunderstanding about the primary exchange at play in art. I'm not religious, but I'm fond of a quote by Pope Leo XVIII. When a man thus turns the activity of his mind and the strength of his body towards procuring the fruits of nature, by such act he makes his own that portion of nature's field which he cultivates, that portion on which he leaves, as it were, the impress of his personality. Created efforts imbue works with a portion of the creators themselves, and a primary engagement with any art is communicating with this force. Games offer no unique mechanisms through which this conversation takes place. The process of assessing the value, message, and purpose of art is the same process for all mediums. The environments shift, but the process stays the same. Better yet, this process is so profoundly personal that attempts to explain your engagement with any piece of art are also necessarily personal. You cannot talk about an experiential affair without talking about the experience. That brings us to reviews. We'll ignore the oft-demanded objective review right off the bat. That's an impossibility. It can't be done. There's just no way that's a thing. So then what is a review? How do we talk about our experiences with a game in a way that is meaningful or otherwise worthwhile? We do so honestly. Fun isn't the be-all, end-all metric of a game's worth, but even something as banal as a review that focuses on why someone found a thing enjoyable is an authentic, and more importantly, valid approach when it comes to talking about games. Some critics say that without criticism, there's no real review. And they're onto something when they suggest that the recounting of an experience should strive to avoid triviality. But this skirts dangerously with a mindset that declares certain engagements fundamentally more valuable than others. That line of thinking is just another plop on the big pile of bullshit. Worse, the underlying sentiment, which essentially is games require more focus and attention, is just a different form of Zimmerman's comments about games literacy. Let's be clear for a minute here. I love games. Games have affected me in remarkable and indelible ways. I would not be the same person I am today if I hadn't picked up a Genesis or whatever when I was a kid, if my next door neighbor didn't have the NES when I was growing up. I want to see writing that approaches games from strong vectors. I want to see writing that treats games seriously. This is why we need our Austin Walkers and our Matty Myers. But the sheer breadth of possible engagements and experiences means we also need a host of approaches and different writings in order to have an all-encompassing notion of games. We might personally value some specific contributions, but it would be absolutely foolish to say that there's only specific approaches that matter. Some approaches may be more personally resonant, but I'm unconvinced that games demand or even deserve the elevation that's thrust upon them. There is a caveat here. Fun, and the expression therein, is not a great hallmark for explaining how a game does something. Experiential accounts explain what is being done. Such accounts are valuable because they allow for a type of projection that lets us assess if an experience may or may not speak to us. They are not barometers of quality or explanations of artistic mechanisms. They are powerful and evocative accounts that speak to the effects a piece of art had on a single individual. And through that, we can determine if we also want to attempt the same engagement with hopes of getting a similar return for our personal investment. I'm not the first person to say this, but the ludic century is a dream, and a very poorly conceived one at that. But it does have one line of note. Games are beautiful. They do not need to be justified. Honestly, the people we're trying to justify games to right now are ourselves. We want to be told our hobby is special, so we tell ourselves our hobby is special. We want to insist that there are proper or improper ways to discuss and write about games. We want to believe that this art form is the art form of the new century. But it's not special. There are no proper or improper ways to talk about art. And games are just one more ecosystem where we can think and feel. Just another environment that stands alongside movies or paintings or anything else.